And with ketamine, there's a lot of uncertainty right now about where and how it's being produced, because that market is shifting really rapidly, because we're seeing just this explosion in demand for it ever since it became fast-tracked for treating depression, and the scientific community took up so much interest. And suddenly you have like middle-aged white moms in the suburbs who are really excited to try horse tranquilizer for the first time, right? After previously admonishing it probably. So I don't know. Like, I really just don't know, but the trends are there. And like it is by far more common to see fentanyl and cocaine than any other non-opioid drug that I can think of, aside from potentially benzo sometimes.
Welcome to the Mr. Bill podcast. I'm Anand Harsh, editor-in-chief of theunst.com, Bill's manager, and as sort of a reset for those new to the podcast, why am I doing the intros? Well, because Bill hates doing them. He's all about that razzle-dazzle show business, come in, do the interviews, get the glory, and get out, and leave the dirty work to me. So that's why you're hearing me now. Today's guest is Rachel Clark. She's the education manager at DanceSafe, a nonprofit that specializes in drug education and harm reduction. You can get test strips and information from their helpful volunteer crews at various events. And Rachel is a veritable font of knowledge. Like me, she stumbled upon Erowid at a very young age and was off to the races in eliminating the stigma around drug use. She and Bill cover everything from the nitrous mafia to Biden's RAVE Act to neo-Nazis, running quite the gamut here. They also discuss the scourge on everyone's mind, the prevalence of fentanyl in recreational and pharmaceutical drugs. Really, really cool interview, and informational as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Artiphone. They made a handheld mini looping MIDI controller and sequencer that's about the size of half an orange. Their bestseller Orba responds to natural gestures like tapping and tilting, and its touch-sensitive pads capture even the most subtle micro movements. You can idea dump your next beat on the go. It's got a built-in speaker and an 1/8-inch headphone jack if you don't want to broadcast your sketches. Use it with any DAW like Logic or Ableton and take full advantage of its incredible MPE capabilities. The best part is it's under $100. So Bill said I had to make a beat with it for the opening, and I was brave enough to share one in the last episode, and I'm going to do it again. Our pal Richard Devine made a few patches for the Orba, which you can get for free from the app, and I made this little Final Fantasy VII type ambient thing. This is an audio medium, but you should go check it out at Instagram.com/Artiphone, Artiphone. You can plug it into a tablet or computer to change the sounds, export videos, do all sorts of things. Use code Mr. Bill's Tunes for 10% off your Orba. If even a dummy like me can use it, you're going to be great. This will become your new addiction. Everything's on the website: tutorials, sample packs, tour dates, and even this podcast. Go to live.mrbillstunes.com for absolutely everything Mr. Bill. And thank you to everyone who supported the debut Kill Bill EP. That's a Bill's collab with Killsmith. It's blown up. Frankly, we're all, shocked, but also not shocked because it's rad, and just really excited about how well it's doing. The shows have been insane. Most of them have been just blown out and absolutely crazy. We're so thrilled. Kill Bill is in Charlotte on May 27th, DC on June 1st, and at Firelights Festival in August. Bill's doing solo dates at Bigfoot Electro at the end of May, and will be at Tribal Connection in Ohio at the beginning of June. Tickets at Linktree/Mr. Bill's Tunes. There you have it. Enjoy Bill's chat with Rachel Clark of DanceSafe.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you are listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're 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 listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Perfect. All right. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's really, really awesome to have you on. I've been a big fan of the DanceSafe Twitter for a while now. And you mentioned that you were the one who puts together all those tweets.
Yes, I do.
I always find they're really...
together is a strong word.
Wait, what would you class it as?
Well, when I started really getting more involved in DanceSafe social media a couple of years ago, I was less involved in Twitter, and I hadn't really used Twitter very much. I'd been predominantly focused on other platforms. And then I discovered that the secret to Twitter is just like saying all of your hot takes as they come to you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I just started, every time I had a thought, I would just put it on Twitter, and I was like, this is really easy. People just are like, yeah, water at shows. Yeah, nitrous balloons. It was just ridiculous how simple it was. So put together, yes, I suppose.
I mean, it's always good advice though, right? Like, I think like just off the top of my head, one I remember was something about like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but putting charcoal filters on your nitrous tanks isn't the worst idea ever. There's like a bunch of people going like, oh yeah. And
right.
I think the one from like I just checked the Twitter quickly to see what was going on there, and it was just a car just like full of empty nitrous tanks, and you're like, can you hear this image?
Yeah. And gotta get the people going,
Yeah, a lot of nitrous tweets. It's a popular substance these days at festivals, and yeah, it's got a lot of side effects for sure. I'm kind of interested as to why that became like the sort of drug of choice. Yeah, I guess because it's just such a quick low. Like, when you take something like acid, it's such a commitment. Whereas like with nitrous, such a low commitment thing. You take it, it's like, bam, I'm high, and then bam, I'm straight.
And it's also legally attainable in some places more easily than others. But nitrous is a pretty complex one, historically, socially, culturally. There's a lot to say about nitrous. It's a really interesting substance in the way that it's become involved in like various communities, counterculture and otherwise, and its origin stories and its distribution. It's just like, it's very interesting. It's more complicated than people think.
Right. Yeah. Would you like to get into that more, or would you?
Yeah. Why not?
Sure. Yeah.
So nitrous rose to popularity. I can't remember which century it was, which sounds ridiculous, but it was an impressively far ago century, 1700s. I think it was the late 1700s.
Wow.
It was discovered as being an effective anesthetic, and it was inhaled out of silk bags. And there were nitrous parties. I call them ye old nitrous parties. And people would go to this guy's mansion, and they would inhale balloons or bags of nitrous and just get fucked up together at these parties. And it became very popular in dentistry, obviously, and is really effective in pediatrics and in other situations where someone needs to be sedated just enough, or effectively it's an anxiolytic, right? It's anti-anxiety, as well as being a euphoriant. And so it's really useful for getting people into a twilight state right before they go under for surgery. Very useful for pain relief as like an added thing. And very useful if you didn't take quite enough acid and you want to kick things up a notch, then one balloon will certainly do it for you. So there's like a whole lot of weird other counterculture history, like the nitrous mafia. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes with nitrous in addition to that.
I did not know anything about the nitrous mafia until the last time I played a show in Philly, and I walked up the front, and there's like a dude with essentially a trench coat with just like a giant tank under it, just like blowing balloons up and passing them to people as they're coming out for like $1 a pop or $2 a pop or something.
Yeah, I'll never forget being at the San Diego Regional Burning Man event in, I think, 2014. And I walked past a camp where this guy was handing balloons to people, and people would take them thinking it was nitrous, and it was helium.
Oh, shit. Nice. Great troll.
Yeah, it was a great prank.
So what is the nitrous mafia exactly?
That's a great question. That's one area of it that I don't know enough about, but it definitely involves nitrous. Right. And a group of people. I just know that it exists. I've been curious about it myself. I want to know more about it, but there's all kinds of wild underground things going on with for instance, there's like an underground mycology ring, and there have actually been hits ordered on people who have shared the wrong spore print of a valuable kind of psilocybin mushroom. So
it seems like the shit that people taking mushrooms would not do, like order a hit on someone. It seems like the kind of shit that, like, I don't know, meth might produce, but like that kind of behavior or something. But I guess, yeah.
See, that's the interesting thing about like the psychedelic exceptionalism movement too, is that I think a lot of people that are really invested in the good drugs, right, like the ones that have become more socially acceptable, typically stereotype negative behavior around people that use the bad drugs or the drugs that are not socially acceptable. But the fact of the matter is that your character can be influenced by certain environments, but your character remains your character. So for instance, I have met plenty of people who are devout consumers of psychedelics who are total dickheads. And there's like a neo-Nazi movement that loves psychedelics, right? Wow. And there are also many people who are like very functional meth consumers who you would never know consumed meth, who are perfectly lovely sweethearts. And it's just all across the spectrum. So it's really interesting seeing like different ways that those things can be challenged by certain social conditions and interactions, like the underground mushroom hitmen and the nitrous mafia, right? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I find generally a lot of people who take drugs have a lot of, not everyone obviously, but like, you know, obviously there's a good portion of drug takers who are slightly more on the addict side of the spectrum than others, and generally part of being on that side, like the addict side, which I myself am on, is a lot of your boundaries are kind of like not as there as maybe some other people's, and just because you take acid and some of those like quote unquote good drugs doesn't mean you aren't going to try meth and other things as well.
Yeah, well, that's actually, if I could get into it briefly, that's actually one of my favorite things to talk about with drugs. Is this idea, let's do it. This idea of like, I don't use personally, because it's not an identifier for me, I don't use the word addict or addiction unless someone requests to be referred to as such, right? Like if someone self-identifies and I'll be like, okay, that's how you want to be referred to, that's what your condition is like for you, then great. But the words I use are compulsive and rewarding and reinforcing.
Totally. Yeah.
Because those three things are really the crux of it, right? Like behaviorally, those three things are the crux of it. So there can be like compulsive use where someone is using something kind of automatically, or there can be like a pressure behind it. And compulsive use usually happens because a substance is rewarding and reinforcing. So rewarding, it feels good, you want to do it more. Reinforcing, for some reason, you want to do it over and over again. So for instance, there are some people where stimulants don't feel rewarding to them because the physical aspects of it are really uncomfortable. Whereas for other people, those physical aspects are really comfortable. Like it's positive, it's rewarding. So I've known several people who have just like smoked meth and been like, I'm unmoved by this. Like, this doesn't feel good to me. I don't want it. And then there's the reinforcing component of things, which is like inherently the way that you ingest a substance is going to determine how reinforcing it is to you, how much you want to continue doing it. So, for instance, smoking something as opposed to snorting it is going to have typically a faster onset, a higher bioavailability, which means that it can be absorbed into your bloodstream more easily, crosses the blood-brain barrier more quickly. And all these things will influence how reinforcing it is, right? Like cocaine, for instance, super reinforcing for a lot of people because it lasts like half an hour.
Right.
And the crash is intense. So there's diminishing returns. And then the reward part is it makes you feel awesome for a lot of people, not everyone.
Right.
So that is a substance that might be prone to more compulsive use, but someone who has a hard time socializing or has a lot of social anxiety might find that they have compulsive use around MDMA, for instance. Anyway, that's just my whole spiel about the relationship, right? Like it's about if it's a toxic relationship with a partner, it's kind of like a similar sensation for a lot of people of like, I know that this is not necessarily beneficial, but I'm having a really hard time not engaging with it, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, yeah, when I use the word like addict for myself, I essentially just mean those things. It's just like kind of an all-encompassing word for the problem.
Totally.
So I asked some people on Discord and some other platforms as well, just like if they have any questions for you. And I actually got a lot of interesting questions that I myself didn't think of, which you've probably been asked a bunch of times, but I'm interested to hear your takes on them anyway. Somebody on Discord said, ask Rachel how xenophobia shapes drug policy because she has a very interesting answer. And I couldn't even think of an answer myself, as to how xenophobia would shape drug policy. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Wow. Well, I'm also very curious who said that I have an interesting answer, because that is delightful. I'm just so happy to hear that. I do talk about this a lot. So there's a book that I read actually in undergrad as part of a public health class that I was taking about La Frontera, the borderlands, the U.S.-Mexico border, a subject of enormous contention for hundreds of years. And I wish I could remember what it was called. I have it written down, but this book was about public health measures that were taken during periods of significant immigration from Mexico. So the Mexican Revolution of the early 1900s, for instance, saw hundreds of thousands of legal Mexican immigrants into the United States. But the United States has, as a predominantly white colonial culture, we have a long history of not liking people who are not white and who are not subscribed to our general ideologies as Westerners who have occupied this territory. We do not take kindly to people entering our space. There's a lot of territorial defensiveness. And in response to that territorial defensiveness, a lot of different things happened. And one thing that a lot of people don't know happened was that when these Mexican immigrants were coming in, and this is not even related to drugs, when these Mexican immigrants were coming into the United States, there was this intensive delousing program that was implemented, because the insinuation was they're dirty, they contain bugs, they have germs, they're going to hurt us because they're animals, was basically the insinuation. We need to reduce them to being animalistic and treat them as such.
Right, treat it like a pest control problem almost, or something like that.
Precisely. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So there was all kinds of stuff around this, around quarantine actually was a really soft spot here. Quarantine was big during these huge immigration swells because of this idea of people being dirty or unclean. Then at the same time, we have Harry Anslinger, who, and for some people might know this name already. He's maybe one of the worst figures in drug history. This guy who was one of the major proponents of alcohol prohibition. And when alcohol prohibition was threatened, so was his job. And Harry Anslinger used to refer to weed as cannabis. And then during the 1910 to 1920 segment, he started referring to it very abruptly as marijuana. So the xenophobia was specifically included in not only are Mexicans dirty, but also the drugs that they bring with them are dirty and dangerous and devilish. And this is seen in Spanish conquistadors and the way that they treated indigenous use of coca, for instance, which they then loved and used in coca wine and started exporting. You would be imprisoned or killed or enslaved if you consume coca. That's just a different version of this. But with the Mexican immigration thing, marijuana started being popularized as the term, and then it became immediately stigmatized as the Mexican drug. And previously it was pretty popular in the United States. There was a pretty significant use of weed until it became effectively eradicated by xenophobia and racism and the way that people were viewing its use. Reefer madness, the main trope, and this is just a flat out racist trope, was the idea that black men would become crazed under the influence of cocaine or marijuana and rape your wives. That was published in newspapers, right? So that happened. And then, of course, we get back to the 70s. I think it was 1974, the Merida Initiative, where we began doing intensive searches at the U.S.-Mexico border because Mexico was not complying effectively enough with the US government's demands about regulating drug imports. They were like, it's your guys' fault. So we bottlenecked them at the border and cut off trade to Tijuana by making it extremely difficult to cross the border by implementing these huge searches of vehicles. So whenever people are like, the Mexican cartels are bringing drugs in, et cetera, or like China is manufacturing fentanyl, all of these things are related to like global foreign policy and related to economic policy. Like none of these things exist in a vacuum, and they all have historical ties to the way that we effectively make up excuses as to why we don't like certain groups of people or find reasons to reinforce why we don't like certain groups of people. Like it's confirmation bias. It's, I know this thing to be true, and this is evidence that it is true on top of that.
Right. Yeah. So, the government can easily say things like, oh, China's, processing a lot of the ketamine or fentanyl or whatever drug, and they're like importing it into the bays of,
it's their fault, right?
Whatever, yeah, and therefore like we shouldn't trade with them in this other way as well, or something like that.
And a really gnarly example of this is the Opium Wars, in which Britain basically like started a war against China when China was like, we're not going to keep. I don't want to misquote the history here, actually, so I'm going to stop myself here.
No
because it's a kind of like a complicated war. There were two opium wars, actually, basically with Britain being like, you need to trade with opium, otherwise we're going to destroy you. Effectively, because China was like, a lot of our people are quote unquote addicted, or whatever word you want to use. Like they have substance use disorders, they're addicted. Like we don't want to keep doing this. And Britain was like, yeah, you do. So when it was economically viable for them, all of a sudden it wasn't stigmatized, and they were like, this is great, and
right.
You're going to do it too now. Yeah.
Right. And they start changing the headlines in newspapers and
precisely. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of fentanyl, I got just an endless amount of fentanyl questions, because that seems to be one of the biggest pain points that everyone is sort of talking about these days with drugs and testing and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just go through all of them.
Okay.
I suppose slowly. We'll try and get through them quickly because I know we have a time cutoff. Where should I begin? I guess, first of all, someone says, who can I direct all my anger at for putting fent in the K?
Well, on the subject of the United States government and xenophobia, the United States government.
Putting fentanyl in the K.
Well, so here's the important caveat, is that a lot of people want a simple answer to what's going on. And a lot of people look at the fact that we have found fentanyl and ketamine. It's really uncommon still, like super uncommon, but it has happened. And the reason for it is certainly at this point with fentanyl and ketamine in the United States, so far, it has been cross-contamination. Like we strongly suspect it's cross-contamination. Like someone is sharing packing surfaces or materials or whatever else. And fentanyl can be lethal in a dose, like a few grains of sand. So all it takes is a little bit of mix-up, and that's it. There are a lot of other theories out there that are unsubstantiated but possible, and I don't speak on any of those because it's really dangerous to speculate about stuff like that. I will assure you that it's not, quote unquote, the federal government trying to kill ketamine users now. Like that's not what's going on with this. It's like you should not have significant trust of the United States government. I will say that like outright.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like all the claims of like they're trying to kill Adderall users now, it's just like it's not quite what's happening.
Adderall users?
We found there was a single report on drugs data of counterfeit Adderall that also had trace amounts of fentanyl, which was certainly from cross-contamination.
Right. It's like the people who are like doing these fake presses or whatever. They have, like their own area where they're making these fake presses or cutting cocaine or whatever. And they're also doing fentanyl-related stuff there. And then when they try and press these pills in the same area, they accidentally get some fentanyl in the Adderall or whatever.
Exactly. And people were all over that, being like, they're trying to kill Adderall users now. And I was like, that's too far of a jump.
Right.
And if we want to solve the problem, we have to look at what's actually happening. And so the root of that question, I wish it were shorter for me to answer these, but it's difficult. It's difficult to get that's
all good.
the root of that really is you can blame prohibition, because the reason that fentanyl rose to prominence was specifically because importing heroin and producing and smuggling heroin was made to be so difficult that a cheaper and more potent and more cost-effective alternative became mandatory. Like, it's really difficult to import and sell heroin in the United States. We see it occasionally, but it's almost entirely fentanyl now.
Wow.
And the reason is that if you have a bag of like diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, and maybe like a little bit of some other bulking agent and a little bit of fentanyl in it, then you can have like a shot that will have, like, people that use dope will be able to tell the difference generally, but that will be convincingly an opioid, because it is an opioid.
Right.
And that became appealing for like other downers like benzos too, although we don't see it that often. It's happened.
Like fake press Xanax and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's so many like novel benzos on the market. That's like a whole other can of worms.
Right.
But really at its core, the reason that fentanyl became so prominent is because we made it so hard to import heroin. And it's all very paradoxical. Like, people are really uncomfortable at the idea that we need to actually make these things more accessible, like the quote unquote bad drugs more accessible, because now that all the fentanyl analogs are going to be banned, I absolutely 1,000% guarantee we're going to see a new wave of even more poorly understood opioids, synthetic opioids, that will enter the market, and we'll have to deal with it all over again. They will just keep getting more potent and more difficult to trace. And it's not going to end. Like, as much as you want it to morally, it's not going to end.
Right. I mean, the only way to really end this is to like ask of everybody to stop doing drugs, really, which is like the craziest ask ever and never going to happen. But you see the same thing happening. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to interject that it's not true that DanceSafe neither condemns nor condones drug use. We condone fulfilling experiences. We condone benefit maximization as well as risk reduction. Like, it would be a flat out lie to say that the world would be like a perfect, better place if everyone didn't do drugs. Like, people have fulfilling positive experiences on drugs every single day, and they have since the Stone Age. Like, it's been happening forever. And we just like don't want to pretend even that is a good solution. Many people's lives are drastically enhanced by doing drugs, and some are destroyed, and those two things can exist at once. That's all I wanted to interject.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Going back to the logic of if we, make fentanyl analogs more difficult to trade, or something like that, that'll introduce like just a different version of it. You see the same thing with ketamine, right? Like, I did a bit of research on ketamine a while back, and realized that it's really difficult to make ketamine, and there's only like a couple of plants in the world who actually know how to make it correctly. And pretty much like in the early days of like ketamine, which I guess was like the early 90s or something, when like people were using it a lot in the early rave scene days, they were mostly stealing it from like vets and hospitals and stuff like that, right? And now that's just not viable, because you can't steal that much ketamine from vets and hospitals to supply the amount of demand there is for ketamine. So you get a lot of like, these weird analogs, right? Like DCK and 2FDCK and stuff like that.
Yeah. And that is another interesting market that we've been watching unfold, because historically the ketamine that you would see on the street that was like ketamine was diverted from labs, but we've been seeing increasing instances of ketamine that appears to be manufactured in clandestine labs, which is very interesting. I suspect that a lot of these labs are in Mexico, but again, every time I say that, I have to be really careful because of the immediate of like, oh, well, Mexico's making the drugs, like that kind of thing. And it's like, well, yeah, because we want them so badly and they're so hard to get here, and people will do anything, and there's a lot of poverty. But something we're seeing a lot more of is ketamine precursor A, which is just precursor made to make ketamine. We don't really know much about If it has psychoactive effects on its own, like we're still learning about it. It's the big head scratcher for a lot of people. And when I see ketamine precursor A in a sample on drugs data, my immediate thought is, oh, this was made in a clandestine lab. This is not pharmaceutical grade ketamine. And B, we're seeing a significant increase in 2,5-DCK and DCK, which is why we made the Morris reagent, which can differentiate those from ketamine. And if you do a bump of DCK thinking it's ketamine, you're going to be really fucked up. It's way more potent.
Right.
Like have fun being in a K-hole for like 6 hours.
6 hours, geez. K-hole for 6 hours does not sound too fun.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's move on from the fentanyl stuff because actually I think we covered most of the even though there was like a lot of questions there, like I think we kind of answered most of them. The only thing I think we maybe didn't, which we sort of answered, I guess, is the chocolate chip cookie effect, which you can quickly explain that one if you like.
Yeah, so the gist of it is that fentanyl is active in microgram ranges, like really small ranges, and I think it starts at like 50 micrograms, it's at like a half tab of LSD, right? Like a typical dose of LSD is 100 micrograms. And so fentanyl is lethal in approximately 0.5 to 2 milligrams, not grams, 0.5 to 2 milligrams. And that's a really, really tiny quantity. So if that is just like somewhere in your bag, which it always will be, it will never be evenly dispersed because it's literally like a few grains of kosher salt, right? Then in order to be able to properly test the whole bag, you have to dissolve the whole bag. And before everyone freaks out, there are ways that you can get your powder back after you do this. Instagram doesn't like it when I talk about this because apparently it's promoting drug use. Right. But if you Google Reddit ketamine recrystallization, there's like whole guides on how to do it. That's all I'll say.
Right.
But yeah, the idea behind that is that you could have 10 people doing bumps out of a bag and one person could hit a hotspot of fentanyl and it could be a lethal dose right there. So that's why I suggest that if you're passing a bag, especially of Coke is by far the most concerning one right now. If you're passing a bag of Coke around, make sure that everyone waits like 8 or 10 minutes between bumps to pass the bag so that if something happens, because it can take a little bit for the onset, like you don't come up on ketamine immediately when you snort it. If you wait like a few minutes between bumps, then someone can respond if someone hits a hotspot.
Right. Yeah, that actually, there's another question in there that we sort of answered, but we can go over it again, I suppose, just to reiterate. I had a friend tell me once a while ago when all of this fentanyl stuff was, I mean, it's still happening, but like, anyway, he was like, oh yeah, I just like don't do K anymore. I just do Coke. And like, that's the way I'm going to like sort of, get around this, this fentanyl problem. But like you just said that like Coke is kind of the worst one or the biggest culprit for having fentanyl in it. And I suppose it might be just because like the people who are using these cutting tables to sort of do everything are mostly dealing with Coke and fentanyl in the same labs, and maybe ketamine is more happening in different labs or something. Why do you think that is?
It's so hard to say. Like I think that this is one of the areas where speculation is really risky, and that like there are many things that I could say as like guesswork, right? Like I could guess, for instance, that the reason behind it would be that the fentanyl trade is like there are a lot of clandestine labs in both Mexico and China, and cocaine, for instance, like the coca production manufacturing process also originates in South America. And during that process, right, like there's a lot of different precursors and manufacturing processes involved, and so the smuggling routes might be comparable. It might both be cartel business, and with ketamine, there's a lot of uncertainty right now about where and how it's being produced because that market is shifting really rapidly because we're seeing just this explosion in demand for it ever since it became fast-tracked for treating depression, and the scientific community took up so much interest, and suddenly you have like middle-aged white moms in the suburbs who are really excited to try horse tranquilizer for the first time, right? After previously admonishing it probably. So I don't know. Like, I really just don't know, but the trends are there, and like it is by far more common to see fentanyl and cocaine than any other non-opioid drug that I can think of, aside from potentially benzo sometimes.
Yeah, that is crazy. I didn't think that would be the case. But
Yeah.
all right, moving on from fentanyl, definitely this time. So another sort of like section of questions that I got, I kind of like grouped them all into sort of areas like of topics, is like people getting their stuff tested at festivals, right, or venues or whatever. The general sort of question that I kept seeing come up was basically along the lines of, if somebody comes up and gets their drugs tested at a DanceSafe tent, what's to stop like a undercover officer or something from following them back to their tent and then going through all of their stuff and maybe arresting them?
To my knowledge and to anyone in our team's knowledge, that has not happened. Generally, so here's the thing, is that like all drug use is inherently risky. That's just like a part. Many things are inherently risky. Like getting in your car is inherently risky. Like riding a horse is inherently risky. Telling your mom that you use drugs is inherently risky for a lot of people. But when it comes to drug checking, there are a few things that would have the potential for law enforcement to be more interested in a DanceSafe booth's activities. And the number one thing would probably be the legality of drug checking materials in that given state. We have a website, drugcheckinglaws.wordpress.com, that goes through all of the different drug checking laws for possession and use and sale in every state in the country. So that's a good place to start, just to see, like, is it illegal for me to have fentanyl test strips on my person? And there's actually one state, I think it might be Arkansas, where it's actually a felony just to have fentanyl test strips.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Like it's ridiculous. Yeah. And
yeah, it's probably like legal to own a gun and open carry there, probably.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things where, like, we've never had an issue with it. None of our patrons have ever had an issue with it. That's not to say it's impossible. Like, I'm not going to say, like, oh, it's always 100% safe all the time. But to my knowledge, it is not a risk in 23 years of operation that we've ever actually had occur. They're much more interested in us, you know?
Yeah.
And
okay.
even so, none of our volunteers have ever been arrested or detained.
And at all, do you usually have, like, police hanging around these tents and kind of, like, asking you questions, or is it they just kind of leave?
Generally, no. Yeah, generally, no. Because we will only be on the premises of an event if we have explicit promoter consent to be there, and we will never test without explicit promoter consent.
Right. Actually, that leads to another, like, sort of topic area of questions, which is kind of like why the general question in this area of questions is, like, why would a festival turn down free drug testing, or like why would a venue not allow you to come in and test? And do you think that them asking or them agreeing for you to come in and test is basically them sort of insinuatingly condoning drug use? And just want to talk about that. So
this is one of the most common questions that we get asked, and the answer is manyfold. So the first thing is that it's usually when a promoter has reached out to us to inquire about services, because that's often how it goes. Is someone will reach out to us and be like, I'm interested. Usually the biggest roadblock is their legal team being like, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. It's in our best interest to advise you to take no risks, etc. And so that usually takes some conversation to lay the foundation of what's going to happen. Sometimes we operate on a plausible deniability model, and sometimes we just, like, don't test. Sometimes we just offer free condoms and earplugs and, like, consent information and stuff about, like, heat stroke and whatever else, you know, like, we're okay with scaling down our services. But I think a lot of this started circa 2002 with the RAVE Act, Reducing Americans' Vulnerability to Ecstasy Act, which gets me every time, introduced by Joe Biden.
Wow.
And this act, I think that when it was passed, it actually was not called the RAVE Act anymore. That was a prior iteration of it. But this act scared a lot of promoters because there was a lot of anti-rave sentiment during that time period. It was like a moral panic. And there was this other juicy tidbit. Dr. George Riccardi, who was a researcher funded by NIDA, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, who conducted a study that rocked the scientific community because it said that MDMA is super neurotoxic to your dopamine neurons. And this terrified so many people that were like, oh my God, like we've been using this for like 15 years in our patients. And like, I've been rolling every weekend forever. What does this mean? And the medical community freaked out, only to discover a few months later that Dr. Riccardi had actually used meth instead of MDMA in his study. And the dose of meth is like 1/10 of that of MDMA. So even as a study on meth, it would not have been applicable to human use generally, because it was just like it was like a proof of concept, basically.
So was he himself just taking like these giant 10 times doses of meth? Or
No. No. It was a rat study, I think. Or no, maybe
gotcha,
it was
okay.
rhesus monkeys. I don't remember which animal it was, but it was not him. Definitely not him. That would be a flawed experiment for sure.
Right.
And so that came out and everybody panicked. And the RAVE Act was passed. And then by the time the study was retracted, it was no longer, like, people didn't get that information really. Like the RAVE Act, or I'm sorry, the retraction of the study just did not hit nearly as many eyes as the publishing of the study did, perhaps unsurprisingly. So that really scared a lot of promoters for a lot of reasons. There was a lot of anti-MDMA sentiment. There was a lot of like, there was just like a lot going on in like pro-drug, anti-drug, like the dichotomy, the warring factions. And so promoters started not offering cool down spaces or drug information or anything that could implicate that they were condoning or admitting that they had drug use at their events. But this was what caused a lot of deaths. In the last 20 years, there have been so many deaths from people who could have not died if there had been drug checking available, if there'd been free water available, if there'd been cool down spaces available. And so I would say that a lot of the time, the biggest fear that promoters have is that it's going to basically be like admitting that there's drug use at their event. And like, let's be fucking real. No one goes to EDC and is like, there's no drug use here, right?
Yeah.
And I say EDC, but it's every festival. That's just one the largest electronic festival in the
There's
country.
no way the promoters or the companies running these things honestly think that it's a 100% drug-free environment.
Yeah.
100%. And the police
Everyone
know this.
knows it.
Yeah, I know.
Bluegrass concerts have so many drugs at them. Metal shows sometimes, I don't know. But bluegrass for sure has lots of drug use. So a few years ago, there's a group called Amend the RAVE Act, and they actually contacted the Department of Justice asking for clarification on whether providing harm reduction at events was criminalizable, because to my knowledge, no one has ever actually been convicted under the RAVE Act. Maybe one person, but it's been so unsubstantial. And the Department of Justice wrote back and said in no uncertain terms that providing harm reduction at your events is essential. So there's that, you know, like providing education is essential. And I can link you that if you want. It's a Marijuana Movement article has like images of this.
Love to put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah. So that's a great way to talk to promoters about this and be like, the Department of Justice has explicitly said that this is an important part of what you're doing. The CDC officially endorsed the use of fentanyl test strips. The United States government officially endorses harm reduction now. Like, it's just like, this is now an endorsed practice. And if local law enforcement give anybody shit for it, you need to have the facts to back it up and be like, this is an endorsed practice.
Right. So that's like probably a good way to put pressure on promoters and venues to be like, hey, we should actually be here doing this thing. And try and like, absolve them of any, legal ramification, guilt that they may have. And,
That's the biggest concern most people have.
Right. Continuing with like legality stuff, has DanceSafe ever been subpoenaed by the DEA or a similar federal agency to turn over like records or provide testimony for any individual?
Nope.
Nice. Another question I have that's kind of along these lines is has DanceSafe ever been accused of entrapment by like luring users in to have illegal substance on them and then get arrested? Like that would be probably accused by like somebody who went in, got their stuff tested, and then later maybe got arrested or something like that, and then was like, "What the hell? That was DanceSafe fucked me over."
You know, I would actually say it's like kind of surprising how little issue we've had. Like there have been a small handful of incidents where promoters have kind of balked in the middle of the event and asked us to leave. That happened in 2014. There's an article on what happened in Electric Forest on our website. And other than that, to my knowledge, and this, like, I will say that, like, keep in mind, this organization has a really long history, so I don't want to speak with, like, complete certainty on the entire history, but to my knowledge, we just have had, like, a surprisingly small number of, like, legal run-ins, you know, like we just kind of do our thing. And generally, the worst that happens is we're asked to leave.
What was the reason that Electric Forest asked you to leave?
Oh, I was not there for it. I would have to read the article about it that was written, I believe, by Mitchell, our executive director, or Eman, our founder. I don't remember which of them, but I believe that it had something to do with law enforcement getting like suspicious or something, and the promoters being like, we don't even want to take this risk, and asking us to pack up. But that could be a complete mistelling, you know? So I can link the blog post as well.
So hypothetically, let's say after they were like, hey, DanceSafe, get out of here. Like, we don't want you here because we think that it's like drumming up some police activity and that's like scaring people, and we just don't want any problems or whatever. If then there were to be an OD at that festival from whatever, do you think that they then, the promoters, would be legally, if not ethically, kind of liable for that to happen, or no?
It's still unsanctioned drug use. You know, it's like people consuming at their own risk a controlled substance, and they didn't test it, and then they overdosed or whatever happened. Like they would be completely absolved of legal responsibility. Right.
I'm sure that's kind of like in the fine print of buying the ticket or something like that in the first place, right? It's like if you
unless it has something to do with their event, and even so, there are like lots of waivers in place and everything, and like agreements and contracts, right? Unless it has something to do with that specific event, then I doubt that there would be any kind of intervention, honestly. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, I imagine they probably also have like insane insurance as well.
Oh yeah, especially the big festivals. It's right. big guns for sure.
Right. So I guess like the final group of questions here is just like advice stuff. What do you think is more useful for somebody to have, Narcan or test strips, if they have to have one or the other?
Ooh, wow. Gee, that is, am I allowed to say both? I feel like I'm not allowed to say both.
Right. I mean, both is obviously ideal, but. Both
is ideal. I would say, oh God, I would have to say Narcan, if it's just you like carrying it around on your person, then Narcan. The biggest issue with test strips really is that people don't read our instructions, they use them wrong. That happens every single day. We get messages either like, I didn't get like a line at all on my test strip, or like, DanceSafe, my Molly has fentanyl in it. And I have to be like, you didn't test it right. We have really long instructions about how to do it. And we're in the process of releasing new instructions that are going to be significantly more visually pleasing and clearer. So look out for those. Pinned on our Facebook page is an infographic series about how to properly dilute using fent strips, because if you dilute meth or MDMA incorrectly, you'll get a false positive. And you have to dilute it right. Like, people don't understand how important it is to dilute it right. It is so important, because I personally have tested ketamine and gotten a false positive because I overconcentrated it. And I called E-Man. I was like, hey, man, there's fentanyl in ketamine. And he was like, you dilute it right? And I was like, yes. No, I didn't. I had to backtrack. And right. So fent strips, super, super important to have on hand. And if you're going to use them correctly, because otherwise you'll get a result that you can't trust, or you'll get a result that is like just not valid. Right. Narcan, we're facing a national shortage of it right now. So I encourage people to be like very mindful of privilege in obtaining Narcan. And if you're someone, for instance, who uses Coke, actually, this is a good answer to the question. If you're someone who comes from a background of enough privilege to be able to have access to fentanyl test strips if you want them and be able to like dilute them and evaporate the water out and everything, use fentanyl test strips, have Narcan on hand for your group, and space out your bumps or whatever it is that you're doing. If you're a person that does not have the privilege of those access, then get Narcan for sure. Like, everyone should have Narcan on hand when they're using in a group. No one should be using alone right now. But I'm saying, like, if you have a group of 10 friends, having every single one of those people try and get their hands on Narcan and like stockpile it is probably not the best move at this moment. You need enough to make sure that your group is protected, obviously. But there are people who don't have access to the same testing supplies who will die if they don't have Narcan. So it's delicate, you know, like I don't want to discourage anyone from getting Narcan, but just like, don't hoard it. Like no hoarding mentality around Narcan right now. But yeah, it's like seeing someone die from a fentanyl overdose is really jarring. I've seen it happen. And it's like, it's a preventable death, really is what it comes down to. If you can use the strips correctly, just use the fucking strips, guys.
Yeah, I think the other thing maybe to touch on here is like with a test strip, you really need to be at home to do it, right? Because you need to like, you know, fully dilute your stuff inside like some sort of container, test it, and then like essentially put it in the oven to like reconstitute it back into a powder. Whereas like a Narcan is just like an inhaler or something.
Yeah, it's a nasal spray. Yeah. Right. So here's how I put it basically is, you know, generally I would say that everyone would know what their own resources are. Like, we will meet you where you're at in terms of diluting your drugs. For instance, with MDMA or anything that you plan on swallowing, you can dilute them at a festival. One bottle cap is just about 1 teaspoon. And if you buy one of our micro scoops, they're like little plastic scoops that hold 10 milligrams of powder. So if you want to do 120 milligrams of MDMA, you do like 12 scoops into a shot glass, and then like 12 bottle caps into a shot glass, mix it up, fent strip test it, because that's a proper dilution. And then you just like take the shot at a festival. You know, that's a way to test it, is test your dose before you do it. If you're trying to snort something at a festival, my concern is that historically we've advised people use the baggy residue method, or like testing a bit of the bag. But with the chocolate chip cookie effect, your likelihood of actually catching the fentanyl with the baggy residue method is not very high. Right. So what I would say is, let's say you're at a festival or you're like at an event and you buy a ball of Coke or whatever, and you're like, damn, I like cannot test this and evaporate it. I want to snort this tonight. What's the least I can do? And the answer would be to use the baggy residue method only to see if it pops positive. If it pops positive, then your bag is contaminated. If it pops negative, you have no idea.
Right.
And you should still, right. You don't know. Yeah. So you're really checking to see if that residue is testing positive. And if it doesn't test positive, all that tells you is the residue did not test positive. Right. Yep. So that's like, you know, it's harm reduction. There are people that don't have housing who can't use those things. So we try and give like the bottle cap method and just like a little bit in the bottle cap. But it's really, it's a science, you know, it's the last thing I want to do is to tell people to like, it's better not to test than to get a falsified result. But at the same time, a lot of the times it's basically just like a completely invalid test if you don't do it correctly. And that erodes people's trust in the tests. Like if you keep testing Molly and it keeps testing positive for fentanyl and your friends are doing it and they're fine, you're going to be like, these are stupid, they don't work. Right. And that's also a problem. So like, you see the issue? We have like hundreds of hours of conversations about this.
Yeah, I can imagine it's like a really difficult thing to tread around and figure out. Really hard problem to solve for sure. Yeah. All right. Last question, because I know you have to go and do more meetings. Okay. If there was like one thing that you could just tell people that they could do to be safer that they might not have thought about before, what would that be? I mean, obviously this, you know, stuff like hydration, don't stand in the sun too long at a festival, all that kind of stuff. I mean, is there any like kind of like weirder, more obscure things that are just kind of really easy to do, but maybe people don't think about so much?
Yeah. The first thing that I would say actually is put in the effort to do your own reading. Psychonautwiki.org is like my go-to for this. And if you just take some time to like click through the wiki, you'll get an idea of just how many drugs there are. And it gives you an idea of like dosing and everything. The second thing, I'm cheating, I'm doing multiple things. The second thing is to be hyper aware of how much you don't know. And this is a big problem with people that get arrogant about it. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. Like, I've been plenty arrogant about drugs in the past. Like, once you know more about drugs than you did as an average layperson, it's really easy to feel like you've unlocked everything. But I've been I'm not a researcher, but I've been involved in the study and practice and art of drugs for a decade. And I have so many more decades of stuff to learn. Like, it's impossible. And I just want to like really stress that to people who are like, oh, I can tell apart the difference between this MDMA and this MDA by looking at it or by doing it or by tasting it or by touching it or whatever.
Because I know my guy is good for it or whatever.
Exactly. Like, we've had people die when their plug of 20 odd years has not known that their batch contained fentanyl this time around. And like, really, you have to take this fentanyl thing seriously. Like, it is so serious. Use with other people around. Make sure that someone in your crew has Narcan. Like, that's a big one. Just like someone in your crew. And know how to recognize the signs of an opioid overdose. It's not the same as a panic attack. They do not look the same. So just like recognize how much you don't know, because that is going to be the key to us being able to take in new information and kind of challenge these rigid structures that we have, because we think that things are a certain way and it's hard when that's challenged. But being flexible about it is what's going to dig us out of this.
Totally. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on. I found this conversation really interesting. I'm sure others will too. And I really appreciate you taking the time. It was awesome to chat with you.
Yeah, of course. And I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yo, what's up? Thanks for listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. This show is produced and edited by Robert Fumo. You can get early access to the show by going to my website, MrBillsTunes.com, and paying me instead of Patreon. And remember to go rate and review on iTunes, or I'm going to come to your house and punch your dog in the throat, upper deck your toilet, and fuck your partner. Note, I may or may not do those last couple of things. You should probably just go rate it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever it is that you listen to the podcast on, because it really helps the podcast. But just know that it'll go a long fucking way to me not doing those things if you do go do that. So just putting that out there.